Hello, my name's John. I'm going to paint some Blood Angels, and you're watching Wargames, Models, and Other Hobbies. Hello, and welcome back to another video. I have just pre-ordered my copy of the new edition of Warhammer 40,000, and am looking forward to painting the Space Marines up as they're intended from the box as Blood Angels, so I thought I'd do a little test first. So as you can see here, I have started painting a model. I'll talk through the paints in a minute, but I've done a few of the darker areas, so the sections between any of the leg joints, and I've painted the whole model onto a white primer. I have done the backpack and completed it, and this is the level that I'm aiming for with the Blood Angels. So what I've done so far, I have used some Blood Angels red contrast paint. I'm assuming it's still available now that the Citadel paints have turned to Warhammer paints, but if you don't have the Blood Angels red, you can use pretty much any red paint with a red wash. So that would paint the whole model red, and then the wash would go into all of the details and things like that, the way that the contrast paint has done here. Now, my first step after doing the contrast paint, I am going to do a dry brush. In this case, I'm going to use some Evil Sun Scarlet, and I'm going to do my dry brush over the whole model just to flatten off certain sections. So you can see here on the shoulder pad where we've got a bit of pooling of the paint there, and you also have that on the legs and the shoulder pad again there. So let me just shake up the Evil Sun Scarlet, and I'm going to use a dry brush just to make the paint a little bit more even all over the model. So put a bit of paint on the brush, take it all off, and then, making sure that I'm on camera, I'm just going to carefully dry brush over all of the model. Now, this may take a few different passes. I have got another colour that I want to dry brush over as well. But what I'm looking to do is just get a little bit of an even coverage, like I said, to flatten out some of the pooled sections of paint. Now, I'm not going to worry if I go over some of the darker sections that I've already painted, because I can touch those up as well. Now, you'll notice that I've left the knee pad and the head of this model not red, because I will be painting, when I decide which company, I'll be painting the knee pad to match the company colours. Let's just do a little bit of stippling there with this dry brush. There we go. So, yeah, so the knee pad I'm leaving. And the head, because of the way that Blood Angels identify their unit types, I will be painting that a different colour. In this case, because this is a support unit, it will be a blue helmet. Now, they have a few different helmet colours in the Blood Angels. So veterans have gold. The battle line, the tactical kind of units, they have red. Assault has yellow, and the support have blue. So yeah, as this is a support unit rather than an assault unit, it will get a blue helmet. But I'm not going to paint that in this video. We're just looking at the red of the armour in this video. So there's a few little sections that I just need to try and knock back slightly. But no, I'm happy with the way that's looking. Like I said, I do have another colour that I'm going to get onto there, but let's lay that down for a second and clean my brush. And what I'm going to do before the next stage, I'm just going to go back over with Skaven Blight Dinge. It can be any dark grey, but I'm going to go over all of those sections that I previously painted that just need slightly touching up because I've gone over them with the red. So I want to be quite careful when I do this step, as I don't want to go over the red sections. There's not many places I have to tidy up, as it tends to be just behind the leg there. A few of the spots just there, and then on the eagle as well. Now, you could leave these darker sections to paint until the very end, which when I'm painting quite a few miniatures, I'll probably do the same thing. So I'll do that. I'll just do a lot of red first, then paint all the other details in one go. And a little bit in there. Yep, there we go. But I'm doing that just now because it gives the paint a little bit of time to dry. Next stage, I'm going to use some of this crimson just to get any points of the model which are missing red paint, or the colour's kind of gone from any detail, so we can look just under the wrist there. I'm just going to put some paint into there. On this side, there's a little bit on the hand here, and I'm going to use this wash just to pick out any details that have kind of been knocked back a little bit too much by the dry brushing. There's not going to be many, but it just adds a little bit of depth here and there. And if you don't have contrast paints, you can use washes like this to get that final kind of depth you're looking for. I've started to use contrast paints more and more as a base for certain colours, especially bright, vibrant ones, because I normally do lots of coats of paint to bring those colours out. Okay, I'm happy with that. Now, what I'm going to do for a second is wait for that wash to dry before I go into the next step. So, I'll be back in a second. So, while I wait for the last few bits to dry, I thought I'd show you a conversion that I've recently completed. Now, this is based off the Space Hulk Terminator Sergeant Lorenzo from the last edition of Space Hulk. I had a spare copy of this miniature, and I felt it'd be really nice to convert it to something different. So I've done a Blood Angels Terminator Ancient using a few spare parts that I had. So the red is all the original model, then I've got a different Terminator head on there, the banner from the Blood Angels Terminators from the last edition when the Terminators were slightly smaller, which he actually is, but to boost his height I've placed him on a stone slab with some Blood Angel iconography on it, and that was from, I think it was from the Mephiston model. But because I've done that, he sits a similar sort of height to the current Terminators. Let me grab one so you can see. Yeah, so if we look at the height difference, because of this little iconography rock ruin that I put it on, he stands pretty much a similar height to a standard Terminator. So I'm quite happy with that. I think it will mingle in quite nicely with the newer Terminator. The height difference of the old Terminator to the new ones are quite considerable, and it's one of my pet peeves is the scale creep within armies when you have some models certain heights and so on, which it's my own personal kind of choice that I don't like to combine the two, but that's why I've done this little conversion, because it's such a dynamic model that I can now put it next to other Terminators. And that's my plan with the Blood Angels from the Armageddon box set, is to add a few other units to them. So I've got some Terminators, I've got the Terminator Ancient, and I've got the models that I'm painting at the moment. But anyway, let's get back to the next step on the armour of this model. And for that, I am going to be using some Wild Rider Red, which is a lighter orange. And again, this is going to be a little bit of dry brushing, but not in lots of places. This is going to be a little bit of dry brushing. It's quite a red orange, so let's just get a little bit on the brush and then knock pretty much all of it off the brush. And then this is just going to be in a certain kind of areas, just bringing this across to bring up any highlights. Doesn't really come across on the camera that well, but that's okay. And this does flatten off any last bits of that contrast paint, but also adds a little bit of lightness to the model itself. And yes, I'm doing this over those darker sections that I repainted, but I'm trying to avoid it a little bit. So there is the red now. That's quite deep in there, the dark section there, but I don't mind too much. I can always knock that back later on. So my next step in the armour itself is going to be painting all the little, let's get it in focus, all the little ports and kind of like plugs on the armour. And I'm going to use some lead belcher for this. I don't always do this with miniatures if I've got squads and squads of them, but with the Space Marines, because you're not necessarily going to have a massive number, or not really going to be painting a massive number in one go, I do like adding these little details. So let's see if that's in focus. There we go. Just that little section there on the back of the leg, and we'll do one on the other side as well. And then we have a little port on the arm there. There's one on the leg there. And I find what this does is it just breaks up the block colour on the model a little bit. There we have one on this arm, just here. And if there's a few areas where I've gone over the edges or anything like that, what I can do is then just touch that up with a little bit of highlighting edges when I get to the end of the painting the model. Now, I'm not going to do it in this model, but there is always the weapons, the belts and things like that, purity seals which can get painted up, likewise with the head on this one. One thing I will do though, because I am going to do another wash on this model, I want to lighten up some of that chest detail. So I'm going to find a lighter grey. That'll be okay. I've got some Dawnstone here, and very carefully Let's just get some of that onto a brush. It's quite a big dry brush I'm using, but never mind. And I'm just gonna lighten that up slightly. Like that. Oops, sorry, it's not in focus. There we go. And while I wait for that to dry, let's do a quick recap of the paints that I've used. So I've started off with a contrast of Blood Angels Red, or it could be an equivalent red or a red with a wash. I've then done a dry brush of the lighter Evil Sun's Red, picked up any areas I've missed with a shade of the Carroburg Crimson, then done another another dry brush of the Wild Iders Red, so more of an orangey red. All of the darker sections of the armour, so between the leg plates and everything, that's done with some Skaven Blight Dinge. I then, as I just did, used some Dawnstone to lighten up the chest details, and then I've used some Lead Belcher on any of those little ports and things. And the final thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to use some Nuln Oil to go over all of the non-red sections, and then we'll see how it looks. So I'm going to start with the sections that haven't had any paint on for a bit, and I don't worry if the Nuln Oil goes over any edges with this. I will probably do more coats of paint in different sections to kind of lighten up the reds or do some weathering or things like that, but this is just to add a little bit of depth at this stage. And yeah, like I said, I don't mind if it goes over any edges or anything like that, as the wash will just pick up different details. So I'll do all of the sections between the armor plates first before I move on to going over any of the metallics, which I'll now do now. So this just picks out a little bit of the detail of any of those ports, and I'll show you what it looks like on the backpack, which we can then put onto this model. I think that's all of them. I don't think I've missed any. No, I think that's all of them. So now it's just the chest detail. So I may find I dry brush this again later on, just to bring out a bit more of the detail here and there. But for now, I'm just gonna touch that on in a few places. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to put that aside to dry for a minute. We'll have a look at the backpack. So in exactly the same way, I've used the Blood Angels red contrast paint first. I've then dry brushed with the Evil Sun Scarlet, and you can always use alternatives with these. I've gone with that shade to pick up a few other details. The Wild Rider red, so a lighter orange to dry brush over a few places. I may do a bit more of that on the model I've just done. Then this doesn't have any of those dark sections, so I haven't used any Skaven Blight Dinge, but I have used Lead Belcher on all of those little metallic sections, and then gone over it with Nuln Oil. So what I'm going to do is take this off this little stick that I painted it on, and we'll have a look at it when it's all dry. So here we have all of the red paint done, and I've attached the backpack. Obviously I've got to paint all the other detail, and yes, it could have been easier without the backpack on, but I wanted to see what it looks like with the backpack on, and also if I do any more washes I want them to kind of be very similar now. But I'm really happy with the way this turned out. This is the way I'm planning on painting my Blood Angels from the new Warhammer 40,000 Armageddon box set. Normally I paint the miniatures whatever army I'm working on, but I quite like the idea of a Blood Angels army, and it doesn't seem too daunting, the number of miniatures that are in there. So just a final recap for anyone who wants to give this a go. It's a white base coat of, in this case I used White Scar, but it can be any white paint, doesn't matter what it is. Then I've used a contrast paint of Blood Angels Red. Now it could be just a plain red base coat with a dark red wash over it, that's fine as well. I've then dry brushed an Evil Sun Scarlet, but any lighter red can go over the top of that. Picked up any other details with the Crimson Shade. Then the orange, that Wild Riders Red, that was the Armour. And then other little details, we've got the Skaven Blight Dinge for those darker sections. Highlighted the Dawn Stone on the wings on the chest. And then a little bit of Lead Belcher on some of those little silver details, plugs and things like that. If you'd like to see a video of me painting the other parts to this, please let me know in the comments, but I hope you've enjoyed this little guide on how I'm going to start painting my Blood Angels. For now, all I can say is, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. My name's John, and you've been watching Wargames, Models, and Other Hobbies.